So, Mark, shall we do a bit of a countdown to make sure that we're all live? Everyone, just waiting for my bank of social media lights because we're streaming live to so many platforms for the South of England Technical Forum. Mark, including LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook. Have I forgotten any?
I, I think that's all of them, isn't it? Are we? Yeah, LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook. Are we on
Uh,
Instagram? Are we
no,
maybe?
we no, no, because that's way too complicated, Mark. That's too complicated for you and I. Right, we're live. Let's get going. Good afternoon, everyone, and a very warm welcome. I am Max MacGillivray from Beanstalk Global, and I'm delighted to be co-hosting today's session alongside Mark Campbell from the AHDB. Mark, say hello. Introduce yourself, please.
Yeah, good morning all. I'm Mark Campbell. I look after the Agri Leader program at AHDB, and also I chair the South of England Show Society annual farming conference. And I'm pleased to be with Max today for this technical forum session.
Excellent. And Mark, should we just do it from the top? Obviously, the South of England as an organisation is brilliant. The South of England Agricultural Society Technical Forum is brilliant. We wouldn't be able to do this if it wasn't for sponsors, for key sponsors. Shall we just give a big up to our
Yeah.
sponsors? Mark, take it away.
Yeah, no, for today's technical forum, we are really grateful for Fram Farmers for supporting this digital series of debates where we cover a range of topics with a range of fantastic rural professionals and farmers that we try and keep our membership and our wider rural community informed. That, like I said, culminates with the South of England Show Society Annual Farming Conference, which this year will be in the Norfolk Pavilion on Wednesday, the 12th of November. Where we'll unpick the title of Who's Responsible for the Next Generation. You heard it here first here. That's the first reveal of the title. So who's responsible for the next generation of our industry? So keep an eye on the Society's websites and social channels because tickets will be available very, very soon.
Mark, what a great title. What a great title. Okay, let's get into our broadcast today. It is titled Fine Margins, Big Impact, Driving Efficiency on Farm. And everyone, I just want to read out a bit of a background, especially for those people who are going to be listening on the podcast. Fine margins, big impact, driving efficiency on farm. And that title really sums up exactly where the sector is right now. We're operating in a landscape where margins are tight. Oh, so tight. Input costs remain volatile, and the pressure to deliver both commercial performance and environmental outcomes has never been greater. The reality is, success today isn't about simply working harder. It's about working smarter. So today, what we're going to explore over the next hour is how marginal gains, often small practical changes, can drive meaningful improvements in profitability, resilience, and long-term sustainability. To do that, you're not just going to hear from Mark and ourselves, Mark and myself. We need some experts on. Jen, so why don't you just turn on your videos, please? So we brought together a strong panel to do and show us how we can all learn from. So we're just going to meet shortly with Keith, Neil, and Ben. So whether you're farming, advising, supplying into the sector, or simply looking to stay ahead of the curve, this is very much a session designed to challenge thinking and, importantly, deliver ideas that can improve your bottom line. And as we go through the session, we really encourage you to engage, ask questions, and share your thoughts. This is about collective learning and real-world application. So let's get on with it. So first off, Ben, could you introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, so I'm Ben Williams. I am the sustainability manager for a dairy processor called Leprino Foods. We make mozzarella with factories in Wales, Northern Ireland, and Ireland for our sort of EU ops, and then 9 production sites in the US, 1 in South America. Yeah, we sell a lot of mozzarella.
Excellent. Hands up if you like mozzarella. Come on, Neil, get the hands up. Thank you, Keith. Okay, well done. Keith, over to you. Please introduce yourself. Keith, just turn. That's it. What up?
Sorry, have to do this for the first time. I'm Keith Gue, part of Holston Farmers Limited. We farm together with my parents and 2 brothers. We're currently milking about 700 cows across 2 sites, all robots, 1 owned, 1 contract farming. We then have an arable business, some diversification, and a arable and beef unit in Scotland.
Wow. Mark, I'm guessing that Keith's business to see on a dairy perspective, Mark, you've been a dairy aficionado. I expect it's awe-inspiring, isn't it, Mark?
It's a very, very impressive business, and the Gue family are always very open for people to come in, see, and pick beneath the surface. But yeah, very, very impressive business, particularly from the transition from conventionally milking cows into the robotic world.
Okay, so that's conventional milking with a twist. Talking about unconventional, Neil, come on, tell us all about yourself.
Yeah, I suppose I don't follow the suit. I'm not from a farming background. My background's automotive industry. So started off at Nissan cars. I was trained by Nissan cars, and spent a career working in America and Eastern Europe and Mexico, implementing lean principles. So this Japanese concept of driving productivity and efficiency into businesses. And then I worked for the British government, working for the Manufacturing Advisory Service, looking at UK manufacturing organisations are looking at what we could do to improve productivity to compete against the Far East. And then around about 2007, set up my own business to focus in on the non-manufacturing sector. I was getting more and more requests in from agriculture and horticulture. So I set the business up to focusing on that side and improve productivity in those businesses.
Neil, thank you very much. And I think it's such a mercurial mix that we've got here. We've got Keith, top of the game on the dairy side. We've got Ben within this complex sector of FMCG. And Neil, I think it's great to have you in, because sometimes I think we could be accused ourselves of being a bit myopic within our sector. To have someone like you coming in, not from an area of more sophistication, but from an area from like lean manufacturing, and for you to be able to come in, and I'm sure you do this all the time, and say, gents, ladies, this is great, but actually what we've learned in automotive after 20 years is do this, don't do that. I'm sure we can pick up on that very quickly. So it's great to have such a mercurial mix of individuals. Mark, how are we going to get information out of these three amazing chaps so that we can learn more from them?
Right, yeah, I've got loads of questions that I think we can ask and have a bit of a discussion. If you're dialing in online or on the various social media platforms, please use the chat. Please send across some questions, and we will try and infill as many of those as possible within the broadcast today. So today's title: Finer Margins, Big Impacts, and Driving Efficiency on Farm. I'm going to open up a bit of an open question first of all to all of our guests today. So if we strip it right back, when margins are hugely tight on farm at the moment, where should our audience, where should our farmers and our members focus first to make that biggest immediate impact on efficiency and farm profitability? Who wants to open with that? It's a bit of a big, broad question. Where do we want to go first?
Well, should we ask Keith, because he's in it? Go on, Keith. I'm going to throw you under the bus. Go, Keith.
Yeah, I thought that was coming. Yeah, great. Thanks, Mark. That's a relatively broad question, isn't it? I think there's a little bit of just, you can quite quickly benchmark yourself and work out where you're going well and where you're not going, where you've got room for improvement. I think there's loads of people that are out there that are desperate and great support for people to do a better job, whether that be vets or consultants or genetics advisors, or wherever those technical skills can come from. But a lot of the time, it's like most of us are doing a great job already. It's just tiny little tweaks that unlock that extra 1-2%. We're not looking for a Hail Mary. We're not looking for that feed additive that you chuck in and it gives you an extra 2 litres, because those things just don't exist on the majority of farms today. What we're looking for is that 2 litres, or that 5% gain. Really, it comes from 10 half a point gains, doesn't it? It's lots of little things that all add up. And for me, it always is cow first, right? It's always, we start with the cow, we finish with the cow. And so if we can nail transition, if we can nail all that dry cow stuff, if we can make sure she comes through with net zero to as few negative health events as possible, then she'll look after us for the rest of the time. Right, so I think, for me, we've got to be cow first. If we can keep the cow healthy, productive, she will end up being as efficient as she can possibly be. Saying that, the alternative side to that is that we need to make sure that we're really prioritising those 100, 500, £1,000 an hour jobs and not getting lost in the £10 an hour jobs. Yeah. Right, we look at feed prices going forwards. And we got really, really lucky. I spent quite a lot of time looking for our contract farming business at blend prices going forward, and we booked all the way through to March 27, about 6 months ago. And, and that's held us in great stead going forwards, because we're relatively protected from a lot of those feed prices that are invariably going to go up with this Iran war stuff. and making sure that we focus on making really good forage, big value top thing, booking feed really, really well, and making great genetics choices, which are going to impact us for the next 5 to 10 years, and not necessarily getting lost in the nitty-gritty day-to-day stuff, I think.
Keith, well done. So you're future-proofing yourself. Neil, there's this saying within our sector that there's so much profitability held up within the supply chain. Do you think that's unusual about our sector, or do you see that in all other sectors, Neil? And how can we free up that make those efficiencies in the sector in our difficult times?
I think what you've always got, it's always easier in any business to look outside of your own business and look at the things that you can't control, and it's easy to blame those things because it takes a little bit of the responsibility away from the individual. What we always try to focus on Lean are, what are the controllables? What are the things within your own business that you've got an influence over, and start there first of all. So we're obsessed within Lean, we're obsessed by looking at all the non-value added activities, all the things that you do that take away from those £500 an hour jobs, as Keith mentioned then, take away from the cow adding value. What are all those little 1%s within the non-value add that are within your control? Start off there and just get into that habit of every single day looking for that next 1% improvement. And then the next day looking for the next one. And then you keep accumulating these 1%, and that's where you get the big improvements. I think the maths side behind it, I think it's 1% improvement a day is worth about 3,000 a year. And even 1% a week is 67% improvement across the year. And that's where the big improvements can be made within the supply chains.
Neil, what done it?
Do you know my pet hate, Neil? It's people walking to get something. It's such a waste of time.
Oh, massively. It's
so irritating.
Yeah, well, it's interesting you say that, Keith, because I know Ben and myself have talked about it. It's that the 13mm spanner syndrome.
13mm spanner.
The time lost looking for a 13mm spanner. If you add that up over a year, it's something like 30 hours, 5 minutes a day, 7 days a week, 52 weeks a year, 30 hours. It's like a half a working week just looking for a few odds and sods that are very easy to fix kind of problems.
So Mark, at your next conference, you've got to give everyone a 13mm spanner in the goodie bag, because that's going to make everyone more efficient. Ben, what's your take on this, especially with your FMCG skill and things?
Yeah, I think in the dairy industry, when we have a bad year, we build a shed, because we scale to try and sort of dilute fixed costs and various other bits and pieces, and then really interestingly, when we have a good year, we build 2 sheds. Like that seems to be the mindset. And the challenge is what we tend to do is sort of scale in efficiency. And I think, to pick up on what Keith and Neil have said, absolutely it has to be about the cow, and it has to be about what you can do now. Ironically, in a volatile market, the best business strategy, because you control it, but also because it is genuinely the best strategy, is not scale. It's controlling your margins. It's generating income over feed cost. Equally, when markets aren't volatile and they're really, really great, they're in a good place, the best business strategy is control your margins and actually make more money. And so, I think for me, it really does start with the cow. I'm fully with Keith on this one. And actually, if you're looking at what can you do now, walk that production environment that you have from the cow's perspective. And if you've got 3 rows of head-to-heads and a single feed face, definitely don't be investing in that magic feed additive, because your feed conversion efficiency is already poor. Work where you can get some concrete troughs on a loafing area and get some feed into those cows. If you've got 180 cows and 150 cubicles, don't be buying a shiny herd vision camera system and various other bits and pieces. I know where your cows are lame. I know where the missed litres are. Wander down, look at the cow comfort scores, look at your lameness scores, look at how the cows are interacting at the feed face. Make sure that you've got the cowpacity, is a phrase that we use, trademark. Make sure that you've got the cowpacity to enable the genetics you've got to actually thrive. What you don't want is 10,000 litre cows in an 8,000 litre environment. That's the first and foremost piece.
Yeah, well done. Plan for the future. It's like the South African farmers always say, in time of a crisis, make a plan. And crikey, Mark, we're learning that with Keith's guidance and Neil's and Ben's interaction. Mark, what's next?
Yeah, no, there's some really good points there in terms of where we're focusing on the focus. whatever your farming business will be, and driving forward that. So we've touched on like your marginal gains and having lots of little things that we do that cumulatively, excuse me, make some progressions. Can each of you kind of share some examples of, from your experiences, those small changes that you've seen made on farm that have had those kind of bigger impacts? So practical little changes that you could share with our audience, that have had those impacts. Neil, from your non-ag to ag kind of world, and I know you've done lots of work in Horton and the pork sector, what kind of little small things have you seen practically that have had big impacts?
One that sticks in mind is the one that we did with one of Ben's farms, and we walked around it. We walked around it with a vet that was part of the team, and straight away the vet picked out the fact that they could see the cows weren't lying down as much as what they should have been doing. And one of the common techniques that we use in manufacturing is we'll put a camera on the process itself, and we'll observe and we'll measure. And what we wanted to understand is how much time was actually spent, the cow was spending lying down, because the vet had informed us as part of the cow day and the perfect cow day that for every hour that the cow was led down, it was an extra litre of milk in the tank. So straight away we were quite interested in it.
Yeah.
We were quite interested in sort of how many hours we spent lying down, how many hours weren't. So Ben got a wildlife camera. We stuck the wildlife camera up in the corner of the shed, and then over a period of time we measured that. And then, as Ben alluded to, we started looking at cow comfort, and we started looking at the size of the cubicle, and was the cubicle right size for the size of the cow? Turned out it wasn't. What did we move on that one, Ben? What was the board that we moved?
The brisket board.
And it turned out from installation, this board had been put in the wrong place. So just by challenging moving the board, the contractor agreed to come back on site and do it for a very small nominal fee. So that was done. And then within Lean, we have a thing, plan, do, check, act. So come up with a plan to do an improvement, do the improvement, and then check. So with the wildlife camera, we then went back and we measured and monitored to see how much time they were now spending lying down and ruminating and producing milk. And then the act was, where do we prevent this happening again in the future? How do we make this part of the normal way of working? So we keep those improvements. We don't slip back to the old ways of doing things. So I think that's one that springs to my mind. Ben, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add on that one.
No. It's I think the farmers are 1.5 litres milk by the end of a week. I mean, it was one of those actions that was incredibly fast, incredibly rapid. You know, it wasn't done sort of a transition from graze to housing. It was literally in the middle of a house period, and that was it. We just watched the milk skyrocket.
A really simple little change with a few hammers and spanners, and yeah, massive impact. What about yourself, Keith? Some that you've made a huge amount of changes. What little marginal gains things have you seen that have made big impacts within your business?
I mean, one of the ones that it has a massive impact, but it feels stupid. It's just making sure all the right stuff is in the right place to use. You know, if someone wants to use a brush, and if you're getting annoyed that something's not clean or it's not been brushed or if there's not a brush there, no one's ever going to do it, are they? You know, it's like if someone's got to walk to the end of the shed and then they've got to walk all the way back to somewhere else to get a scraper to do your crossovers, they're not going to do it. So just put a scraper on every crossover, and then at least it'll get done. You know, we focused when we did our design. We spent a long time working with three different consultants, probably. You know, our lady centre supported from robotics area, Tim McKendrick, who supported with our building design, but also a Finnish company called 4D Barn, who helped on efficiency and working. And they used a metric called milk per man hour. And that was really helpful to think about how we were designing a unit to maximize production for the number of people that we were going to have. And so stupid things like that make a massive difference. Part of that review by 4D Barn was that we put a tiny little storage area bang in the middle of the shed, right in the middle of everything, where everybody's walking all the time, where you can put brushes, scrapers, you know, chemicals, all that sort of jazz, so that we're reducing our amount of non-value added time, as Neil talked about earlier, walking to and from places to pick stuff up. you get from stupid little bits like that to all the way to actually a big thing we did that made a massive difference was we started milking all of our calved cows in our calving area. So we just got a little mobile milker, tiny little handling area, really not a huge investment. But we doubled our colostrum yield on first milking. Bricks quality went up a couple of points. So automatically we've got better calf health. So you got a big reduction in labour at calves. So you all know calves are a massive time sucker if you get it wrong. But also it means that your second colostrum feed, and now instead of being a big job, because you've got to milk the cow, get the milk, put the milk in the tuber, go up to the calves, feed it when it's warm, we're now just taking colostrum that we've cooled and stored and then reheating it at a time that fits the schedule that the guys are in. And so instead of it being a job that you've got to work around, it's a job that you fit into your current schedule. And so we enable ourselves to become a lot more efficient that way. Just it's lots of little bits and pieces. On a robot dairy, it really is finding a way to make everything happen on the way from somewhere to somewhere else.
Yeah.
Right.
Well done. Gents, can I just steal the conversation? I just want to challenge you all. I'm going to ask you a question, and this is about future proofing. In the Farmers Weekly, Mark, sorry, Neil, you know the Farmers Weekly. It's 45,000 people read it every week. They did a survey in the year 2000. What was the greatest invention for farming that's benefited farming for the last 50 years? That was in the year 2000. What was the thing that came up top? Ben, what was it?
Heated gilet.
Neil. Oh, just Neil, turn your mic on.
A whiteboard for putting jobs to be done upon.
Mark.
Oh, God knows. A fancy app.
Neil. Sorry, Keith.
Calculator.
The mobile phone. So the mobile phone was voted the most important thing on farm in the year 2000. So the question back to you, what's going to be the most important thing for everyone dialed in the next five to 10 years? Go, Keith.
I like Neil's whiteboard. Big fan of a whiteboard.
Okay, there you go. Everyone get a whiteboard. Neil, what's yours? And you can't have a whiteboard.
It's probably a combination between a whiteboard and a mobile phone. I've seen people sort of have little what we call Kanban boards on apps on people's phones, and it's a list of all the jobs that need to be done.
Okay.
Stuff that's been done and the stuff that has been completed. So all the farm can see through the mobile phone app everything that needs to be done.
Wow. Okay, Ben.
I actually don't think it's a physical thing. I think it's an upskilling. Like that's the biggest gap between, like, it's all well and good having a whiteboard, but if you don't know what you're putting on it and you don't know what you're taking off it, it doesn't matter. Yeah,
well done, Ben. There's a great graph that comes out from Cranfield University that shows that those businesses that invest in training and development have higher turnover, higher profitability, and far better staff retention. Mark, you're not getting away. What's the thing that you'd suggest?
I think building on Ben, that's a really good point that Ben's made about skills and upskilling and ensuring people are fit for the future. And it's also then that prioritisation and time thing. Everyone always says we're time poor, which we probably just spend, like Keith said earlier, more time in the £10 an hour jobs because we like doing the £10 an hour jobs and not so much time in the more higher value jobs that are going to create efficiency and create more time. So yeah, time. We need to have more time.
More time.
It's a funny one, that time one, just to pick up on some of those case studies, and one that links Neil's and Keith's together. We had a farm that had two blocks on the same site, so a spring block and an autumn block, and the spring block was flying, doing really, really well. The autumn block, given that pumping a lot of cash in to feed those cows, yield was challenging. And wandering around, the limitation was feed face. So great solution. Let's kick in some extra feed face. We've got some loafing area out there linked to that group of cows. Let's go. And the resistance was, look, the staff already pressed the time. Don't have time to do it. Can't find the time to do it. It's never going to happen. And so we spoke to the staff and said, well, where would you find 15 minutes? And at the time, the autumn block had to zigzag through the spring blocks to get to the parlour twice a day. And we said, oh, it seems like a bit of a pain in the backside. Why don't you just take the concrete panels out at either end of the building and just walk them through the middle of the building? And the staff went, yeah, we've talked about it, but we've just never got around to it. So we went and got the loader. We stuck the gates on, came back a few weeks later, and the exclamation from the staff when I said, oh, so how's your new gates? They were like, life changing.
Wow.
Like, it's not, is it? It's a gate. like let's bring it back down a bit, boys. It's a gate. But they'd also then gone and built the feed face, and they'd seen 2.5 litres onto that block. Like, you know, return for the business owner, but from the staff point of view, it was 15 minutes a day where they could go and dedicate. They never got the time back, but they invested it in something that was now, 50, 60, £100 job.
So that's leading on from that, and you guys have given some really interesting, real practical, simple solutions that hopefully save time, make life easier, which you can have a positive impact. Neil, this probably goes straight to you. So if we look at our industry and our farmers, people are blooming busy. It's tough out there. There's a lot of other priorities out there. And because we're really busy and potentially in some situations stretched for staff and labour on unit, we're not very efficient within our businesses. So how do you help businesses distinguish between activity and productivity to kind of build that importance of how we can become more efficient?
So when we go on farm and we do something called a waste walk. So we'll actually walk through a typical process and we'll map it from start to finish of that routine. Might be a feed routine, might be a spraying routine, could be a harvesting routine, whatever the process is. And going back to what we say now, we identify what adds value and what doesn't add value. And you add up, you calculate the distances and the time for each step, and you imagine up on the side of the barn, massive great big sheet of paper, loads of post-it notes on it, showing sequentially what's involved. And normally what we do, yellow one, non-value add, pink one's a value add. And value add is the stuff that generates the value in the business. This is the stuff that ultimately you're going to get paid for. The non-value add typically is the activity that you describe. It's the stuff that ultimately it's filling people's time and it's filling people's day. And when you look at it and when you analyse the ratio between the pink post-it notes, the value add, and the yellow ones, which is non-value add, it's normally only about 5% of the post-it notes add any value. There's only about 5% of the jobs that really do make a big difference in terms of where value is created. And just really first of all, getting the farmers to see that, and then going through each yellow post-it note and saying, right, can I eliminate this step? Is there some improvement that I can do that will take this step out completely? You know, shadow boards, as Ben mentioned, about moving gates and taking out dead legs in parlours and things like that. So that's the first thing. If I can't eliminate it, can I reduce down the amount of time it takes? So what ideas have I got, and what ideas have the rest of the farm workers have got about how we can reduce down the amount of time it takes? And then if I can't reduce down the amount of time it takes, can I combine it with something else? So I've got two jobs going on at the same time. I think, Keith, you just mentioned there about doing something on the way back to doing another job, you know, those kind of things, all those ideas. And you imagine going through every yellow post-it note and doing that as a team to start to think through, you know, and really pull these routines apart. And that's where you then start to separate out activity from true value add and true productivity improvements.
And that must be quite a powerful thing where you're seeing the 5% of value add against the plethora of yellow post-its. Keith, sorry, I've just jumped over.
Yeah, so I was just gonna say I'm a huge fan of a bit of time and motion. Like, you know, how long does a task take? Are we doing it efficiently? Like when we did all our design, we wrote down a list of every task that we currently do on the parlour. How many of those were going to be relevant to do when we're on robots? What was going to be new that we were going to have to do on robots we didn't do on a parlour? Then we sat down and mapped it out on a bit of paper. Okay, how are we going to do this? And then started changing, even like scraping sheds. We write, okay, so where are we going to drive the tractor to? Where's it going to park whilst we move the cows? Where are the gates going to go? Okay, so actually we can't do that because we need another gate there. Otherwise, we can't do that. We ended up putting another exit on another group because it was going to save us driving all the way back to the end of the shed. And then when we put the robots in, we went and sort of tried to validate that. So how accurate were we? Which bits have we really just got wrong because they don't work in your head like they do in reality? And then how does that work? And I was just, as Neil was talking, I was just thinking, actually, we probably need to go back and revisit that and do it all again. It wasn't quite as in depth as Neil's done, but that sort of process is something that's super useful.
Just to steer the conversation, Ben, Mark, do you see many farms like Keith's adopting the Neil's thought, whether it be yellow post-it notes or something similar? Are many farms constantly challenging themselves, or is that why they're dialed in today? Ben, what do you think?
I think, well, to answer that and perhaps bring on another point, it's an interesting piece about efficiency. Like we often tell, and we, as in the supply chain, will often tell farmers, the best thing you can do for your business and the planet is to be more efficient. But they didn't wake up this morning thinking, I'm just going to give up today. I'm just not going to bother. Like they are working to be as efficient as possible. So I think that's something really important to call out here, because there is this narrative coming down, and it's absolutely coming down the supply chain, that farmers have to be more efficient. But if you want to see that efficiency on farm, a step change over and above where it is, you have to teach that difference. And that's not in a sort of, I'm going to teach you in a patronizing way, but we're all skilled professional business people. We want to grow and develop, so give us that development input. And I think that's a really critical piece. So I think to sort of turn around and say, there's a lot of farms that are doing this, or the vice versa, there aren't a lot of farms doing this, and that almost becomes a negative view of the industry. The reality is, who stepped in to show people what they don't already know? And I think that's more the problem. We haven't really sort of gotten out and taught this. I think the other piece is, there's a translation piece from sort of where Neil was there around, this is how lean has been applied within sort of industries that are very labor driven. Let's be honest, dairy isn't massively labor driven, although dairy farmers work a huge amount of hours. And if we're being brutally honest, the system doesn't care how many hours you work. It cares how many liters you produce from your farm. And so the value add that you apply this to is not necessarily the labor on your farm, although it's really important for staff morale and engagement, but it's the cow. Where is the waste in the cow's day, in the cow's motion, and the cow's movement through a 24-hour period, or a 305-day period, or a 3.3 lactations, or hopefully longer lactations? Like, where is the efficiency there? Because that's the value add. Because you're paid for milk, you are not paid for labor. And that's a really important thing to pull out of this discussion. That's where money is made, by deploying lean at cow level, not necessarily person level.
Mark, your thoughts?
Yeah, that's a really interesting point to think about, because you summed it up perfectly there. We get paid for milk. We don't get paid for the number of less hours that your team works on.
Rightly or wrongly.
Yeah. No, and I'm building on that. So if we think about behavioural change and social science and getting farmers to step back and think about this, and this going probably to you, Ben, these behavioural changes probably are harder than technical changes to actually adopt. How do we instigate that on farm? How do we get teams? How do we get farmers to actually do something a little bit differently?
Yeah, well, our lean came out of a behavioural change process. We didn't go, here's lean, a solution, and then find a problem for it. That's not how we came about it. So we actually, when we were at AHDB, and in fact, even before I met Neil, we'd sat a load of pig farmers together in a room, and they had two challenges: meet rumour targets on antimicrobials, and move to even more responsible use of antimicrobials. And this challenge of efficiency. How do you become more efficient? Because you're already in a position where you're trying your hardest. What's the step change? And so we looked to a behavioural science sort of scaffold called Reset. So these are 5 broad categories of levers: regulation, economics, social motivators, education, and then things. Tools and technology is what normally goes on there, doing things differently. And normally Reset is done to people. So the government have a nudge unit, and they would come up with, this is how you'd pull this lever, and you'd do that to a person. Carrots and sticks, basically. Problem with the carrot and stick is, when this carrot and stick go, everybody goes back to what they did. We took a slightly different approach, and we looked at something called boost psychology, where you co-design around that framework with the people you're looking to change. So you invest in their competency, so they're part of the process. You build them up, you grow, and you engage in the change with them. And basically, we sat about 50 farmers in a room, split them into groups. We ran through some sort of hypothetical resets on how do we stop them speeding, because we all like to go a little bit fast when no one's looking. And then we started to apply the same logic to these problems. And from an efficiency point of view, it was fascinating. Like, you'd expect technology to really feature, and it didn't. What the farmer said was, we need to see people who are doing this. Like I want that social piece, and there is this understanding that farmers are really, really keen on peer learning. So finding those Keiths out there who are driving efficiency, and they'll have their wins and their failures, and they're just as important, was key. But they themselves said, I need educating. I need to know how to be more efficient because I'm trying my best. So then we mapped how do farmers learn, and I'll be honest with you, just because farmers learn really well from other farmers doesn't mean they learn best on farm. And so AHDB did a really cool piece of research where they phoned up 403 farmers pretending to make their service better. We'll judge whether they did or didn't. But they actually ran them through a Honey and Mumford learning styles assessment. And that sort of gave them different learning typologies. And it turned out farmers are what we call a pragmatist. So they want the narrative, they want the why. Where is this going? What is the value to me? They want a story. And obviously they want it where they find their information, in a form they find their information. The art of communication is still, Max, massively important, as you'll be aware. And so we looked at sort of that cycle, that effective learning journey, pragmatists, theorists, reflectists, so on and so forth. And the long and the short of it is it follows a plan, do, check, act methodology, which, as Neil has already pointed out, is the framework of lean. So lean itself, how do you make farmers more efficient, is a behavioral science outcome. But that approach, generally speaking, co-designing and looking at the levers that sort of move people from recognizing a need to do something. Yeah, I know I need to be more efficient, or I know I need to look at sort of the lameness in my herd, or I might need to supply data to EMB, or whatever it is. But let's face it, we're busy, don't want to do it. That shift into want, that's where those levers come in. And it's different for different target audiences, different problems, and so on and so forth. But taking the time to think through that approach is vital if we want to see rapid transition, supported, co-designed, genuine, sort of from the ground up movement.
Well done.
Can I just add two final tiny little bits that I think Ben's bang on right. You've got to want to do it. And whilst we do a reasonable job, we're still not there. I mean, I've had the Lean Dairy Farm to read for about 3.5 years now, right? And it's still sat in the footwell of my car under about four cans of Coke and five crisp packets. And I keep meaning to read it, and I don't get around to it. But the other thing is, it just, as Ben and Mark were talking earlier, it reminded me of what probably the biggest switch in efficiency that we ever made was, and it was hiring another person. Wow. The biggest efficiency cost is being understaffed.
Well,
right. And because Ben's right, because when you're understaffed, the cows stand too long in the collecting yard. When they're understaffed, they're without feed for too long. When you're understaffed and everyone's running around like a headless chicken, and you make mistakes because everyone's knackered, right? And then you just catch up. The amount of dairies that it feels like, I might be wrong, but the amount of dairies it feels like you add a labour unit and you make that dairy miles more efficient is probably not a short list.
Yeah. Neil, can I just jump in? Give you a crazy example. When automatic milkers started coming in Ireland, they had a particular problem because they thought this technology was going to be a little bit hard to sell on a technical basis. But what actually happened in some parts of Ireland was that the farmers didn't want to adopt them because the farmers were asking, well, what would I do? What would I do? And it's like, well, you could go out and find a wife or do. But Neil, do you see that in other sectors, that there's a slow rate of adoption, or other sectors aren't adopting the yellow sticky pad methodology? How can we create that success within agriculture to get people to adopt and make these changes that could potentially future-proof a business for the long term?
Yeah, I think you've hit on something there, which is, going back to what we're saying about activity versus productivity, or activity versus value add. People want to be busy. They like being busy. They take comfort out of being busy, and therefore anything that sort of reduces down, saves time, sometimes can be seen as a negative connotation because they haven't planned what they're going to fill that time with. It's a bit like when you retire. You don't plan out what you're going to do when you retire. It's a long retirement, is that? And it's the same way in work activity. You need to plan out what you're going to do with those additional 30 hours that you free up. What £500 an hour jobs, I love the term £500 an hour jobs, are you going to pick up instead? And I think it's educating people in that and demonstrating that by stepping back, by stepping out of the process and observing it and identifying further improvements, you know, that can be just so rewarding when you start to do that. It's much more rewarding than just filling your time with activity. And it is literally around stepping people through that. And once they've been through it once, hopefully at that point they'll get addicted to it, like we are, and they'll want to do it more and more.
Yeah. Mark, presumably you see with the input of the South of England Technical Forum that's why the forum exists, to have this sort of conversation, to get the likes of Neil to advise people so that they can free themselves up and become more efficient and become an Uber farmer like Keith, or an Uber supply chain expert like Ben.
No, exactly that, and that's what these technical forums are for. Is just bringing people like that our membership and our local rural communities might not have come across. Just to spark some of those ideas and push things forward, which is all what we're trying to do. So going back to you, Keith, going from milking cows conventionally, chucking it into robots, then taking on another unit and pulling milking parlours out and putting robots in. What was your biggest gain by doing that, and how did you bring all the team along with you? Because for some of those, I know from some of your team members that have been with you for a number of years, that must have been a huge change and a huge adaptation of working processes. You've talked about adding an extra labour unit in to make everyone's life a little bit easier, but what else? What was your biggest gain from doing that, and how did you bring your team along?
Well, the labour unit bit was actually when we started the parlour, so and that was a massive thing, especially because hours are more challenging on a parlour. People are earlier mornings, later nights, it's harder to do. When we put the robots in, I guess there was a big transition. Everyone saw the value, right? And you could see that guys, no one works with cows because they don't like cows, right? I've never met a single person on a farm who works with cows who doesn't like cows. So seeing the biggest thing to get everyone on board was seeing the cows, A, more comfortable, B, running their own day, but also performing to a higher level, getting much closer to their genetic potential. That gives the guys a kick. They get a buzz out of seeing cows do unbelievably well. So I think that the cow health and cow performance was a big positive, and it got people really involved. Also trying to help, we did quite a lot of, I don't know, in my old life, we'd call it like onboarding for the change. So we took them out to see other robot units. We got them to go, a lot of the time I took them and dropped them off and went and did something else. So they got to see it and engage with the guys who were on the ground there, made sure there weren't owners and managers about. It was just, two sets of teams chatting it out and, talking about all the stuff that was crap and talking about all the stuff that was good. And a lot of the time that helped them come back and say, oh, we don't want to do it like this because I spoke to the bloke there and they hated it, like that sort of stuff. And it gives them a bit of ownership as well, I guess. But saying that, we're on probably we're probably on our fourth iteration of the team now. We've tried, as we've looked to see how the team works together, how the work changes as we cut out some non-value adding work and add in some other value adding tasks and tweak what we want to do and the people that we've got. It's trying to work out how you get the best out of each person in that team, and not being afraid to change ways of working, protocols, roles and responsibilities to get the team to work well together, I guess. The final thing is the multi-site thing. A big part of that for us was we had people who we trained, developed, upskilled, and then the problem was they didn't really have anywhere to go. Right, their next promotion or the next step almost invariably had to be out of our business because they were where they're to. Unfortunately, they weren't going to take my job, and that's just the way it was. And so having a second unit where you can get a bit more responsibility and you can start to move people through that business was really appealing to us. And actually, the guy who's doing an unbelievable job of managing that second unit now for us was someone that we trained, developed, and supported in his career when he was 18 to 23. He's been away and gone and done some other stuff, and now he's back working for us, and he's absolutely killing it.
Brilliant. Ben, Neil, do you think that Keith is positively unusual in his thought process around this, or do you see that duplicated with other dairy contacts that you see, Ben?
No, I don't think Keith is unusual. I think it's perhaps it's a bit more unusual to find that, I don't want to call it naturally Keith, because it's probably not fair. You've worked your backside off to build a business to where you are. I imagine it's been blood, sweat, and tears. But there are some that are perhaps a bit more predisposed, or they have found the process a bit more successful. I think the interesting thing about sort of lean and the framework is it allows a lot more people to move there. The difference is if you haven't had that input, you don't know what you don't know. So I think the potential to sort of reach sort of where Keith is, and there are a good chunk of other farmers out there, is in the vast majority of farmers, naturally, and then some more with a bit of a mindset shift. So yeah, no, I think there's a huge return. And Neil, you use a phrase sort of called lean goggles. It's amazing. You can take some people who, like our first cohort, we had 10 farms, 5 were sort of progressive farmers. You'd probably sort of say around an AHDB meeting table. The other 5 disliked me specifically. The logic being, yeah, believe it or not, I'm not always a winning personality. But yeah, the logic being is if we could convince them that this lean would work, and put them as our social advocates in our reset levers, then actually in bringing in the next cohort, it would be a lot easier. And it was amazing. They were our biggest advocates, because once they got the lean goggles on and they could see in their business where their own management was costing them, not where there was a premiumization difference if they did it or not, but where I in my business am costing me money, like really powerful psychology, and it does drive change.
Yeah, well said. Neil, thoughts?
Yeah, I'd say, Keith, I think it sounds like the difference between yourself and some of the other reformers. It sounds like you've been issued with your lean goggles and you've got them and you're happy to wear them. But fundamentally, I think everyone, that whatever business you operate in or whatever farm you operate in, you fundamentally want to change it. You want to improve it. You want to make it better. There's something about that, something bigger than the profit margins at times for me. You're willing to withstand the smaller profit margin, providing you can see progress over a period of time. And I think that's what unifies farms is that desire to make things better. That's what we've got to tap into. We've got to tap into that.
Yeah, well done. And can I just push back a bit? It's interesting what you said about profit. That Mark and I've used this quote a couple of times before. Princess Royal at the Oxford Farming Conference, which anyone who doesn't know happens in January. And the Princess Royal is, I think she might be the patron, but she sat there for the morning session, and when she had her bit to 300, 400 people, she said, the one word I haven't heard from everyone today is profit. Profit isn't a dirty word. Profit means that you can invest in your business for the future. And I've just had a question in from a chap I know in Somerset who's a dairy farmer. And he's asked us quite eloquently. He said, Max, driving efficiency on farm, if we could drive efficiency, how can we attract better margins from our customers by driving efficiency? Go on, Neil, I'm going to give that to you with your automotive head and sort of a foot into the ag sector. What do you think? How can we gain more margin by driving better efficiency on farm?
I mean, we've had some difficult conversations with farms recently. Everything that's been going on around the world and the way input costs have been spiraling upwards, and sometimes going back to freeing up time within the business and then using that as a £500 an hour job. One of the £500 an hour jobs we did with a farm quite recently was literally to get all the input costs out on a piece of paper and almost apply the 80-20 rule to it. So looking at where were the biggest costs within that business, what were the things that contributing 80% of the costs within that business, and stepping through it line by line and saying, right, how can we knock out 5% from each of these elements within the P&L itself that go into the cost input. But we could only have done that. A business can only do that if it frees up a bit of time to start off with to be able to do those kind of activities. So I think your first thing you've got to do is you've got to free up a bit of time. The second thing you've got to do is use that time then to focus in on where you can potentially reduce down the costs within that operation, which may be a short-term activity you need to focus in on.
Yeah, Neil, well done. Ben, throw that question to you as well. You've got that great relationship on both sides of that commercial relationship.
Yeah. So just to clarify, what I've taken from this piece here is not necessarily how that business can secure its own margins within its own cost of production, but how it can squeeze more value out of the supply chain for being seen as efficient, progressive, and driving. And I think that's a really interesting conversation because on the one hand, the supply chain doesn't owe any of us a living. Like the market returns what the market returns, and that's driven by supply, demand, and sentiment. And supply and demand are fairly trackable, and when crap hits the fan, there are occasionally predictable outcomes. Sentiment is much more challenging, and that can add a lot of volatility. And I think at face value, it would be a bit glib and sort of a bit depressing for me to turn around and say, I'll be honest with you, like lean and efficiency isn't going to allow you to squeeze more margin out of the supply chain at all. It's all about your cost of production. But I don't think that's entirely true. I do think there's an element of sort of when a business has driven that efficiency in and they have got those staff who are really pleased to come to work and they are absolutely at the top of their game, and there is a lot more goodwill and flex and agility within that business. It gives you an ability to pivot, and there are opportunities for premiumization coming through from cost of production linked models and various other bits and pieces, and perhaps they're not coming fast enough. But by having that efficient business, you can pivot and move and take those opportunities when they come in, and be ahead of the curve and sort of there. How can you go out en masse and then sort of pull more money from the supply chain? If I knew that, I'd have done it and we'd be paying our farmers more, I think is sort of the holistic point. But there is something in that agility there. I mean, if I look at our farmers who are absolutely thriving within our value flow, they are those businesses that are agile. I wouldn't describe them as environmentally sustainably minded. Like they aren't doing all of the sustainability for stuff for me and pulling in those price premiums purely because they care about the planet. They see the efficiency within their business. They see the ability to build resilience within their business, and they do it for that. And I think there's a little bit of margin in there. But yeah, the real value of lean is controlling what you can control. Once the market has returned to value, actually, how can you maximize the element within that? And there's a little bit about farmer mindset, isn't there, where, and this is a broad sweeping statement, and I'd quite happily be challenged back. But if you have a room of farmers together, you put 10 dairy farmers in, they'll be like, hi, I'm Max, I've got 400 cows. Hi, I'm Ben, I've got 75 cows. Like that is a really weird way to introduce yourself. Like I wouldn't go into a room of cheesemakers and go, hi, I'm Ben, I've got 6 vats. Like it means nothing. It speaks nothing really of the business itself. What it does is it gives this impression of pursuit of net worth, not net profit. And it's a very, very different business mindset being net profit driven and being net worth driven. Net profit is all about margins above and below the market line. And that mindset shift is probably the most powerful thing that lean can enable to allow you to take the opportunities where they come.
Ben, thank you. Mark, just an admin point. We've got 5 minutes before we need to land this big bus on the runway. Mark, over to you.
Oh, sorry, Mark, I'm going to just close 2 seconds.
Yeah, jump in.
Take it, Keith.
Sorry. The most undervalued role and job on nearly every dairy farm going is supply chain engagement. Right, there are, the biggest way to get more margin out of the supply chain is to engage with the supply chain. Right, if you talk to them, right, you will understand what they want. When you give them what they want, they'll pay you more. Right. It's not a perfect correlation, but most of the time, if you've got retailers looking at cost production contracts and they've got a gap and you're already hitting all the specs they want, guess what? You're going to get it. Yeah. If you're not doing any of the things that they want you to do, you don't stand a hope in hell of getting those premium contracts. Yeah. Right. Engaging, talking to, understanding the wants and needs of the supply chain is the biggest step to drawing more margin out of the supply chain. We keep talking about being price takers. Well, it's not actually 100% true. If you're just farming and you don't engage with the supply chain at all, that might be true. If you actually try to understand who your customer is and then try to work in a way that meets their wants and needs, then you're much more likely to get more margin out. And I think we talk about £10 hour jobs, £500 hour jobs. Sometimes picking up the phone to your buyer is probably the largest value job that you can potentially do.
Well done, Keith. Find out what their problem is and create a solution. Mark.
Communication is king. No, it's we can go on for hours, couldn't we, Max? Which is phenomenal. Yeah, where do I start in terms of wrapping up? We've gone through all sorts of things. I think the couple of things that I've written down: control the controllables that Neil said, and then link that to what Keith said about focusing on the focus. So if it's the cow, if it's the sheep, if it's the crop of wheat, focus on that first, and not the hours. Prioritize your time. Once you've done your value map and you've identified where the waste is, prioritize your time from the £10 an hour jobs to those £500 an hour jobs. And the final point I put down is, Neil, where can we buy or lease or get a set of lean goggles? So put your lean goggles on and reach out to these people, Ben, Neil, and Keith. I'm sure they'll be able to help. But what a broadcast.
No, that's fantastic. And Tim, just to wrap up, we've got a few thousand people dialed in on the various platforms. So the title was today: Fine Margins, Big Impact, Driving Efficiency on Farm. Keith, just summarize for us what your advice would be to everyone dialing in as to how they can run a better farming business. Oh, such a big question. But Keith, have a go. Run it. As
I said at the start, I think the vast majority of us are running great businesses already. It's finding those little things that are giving you a bit of an uptick, and work with the people who are there to support you to identify where the wins are and what those little tweaks need to be.
Yeah, love it. Neil?
Yeah, don't delay doing the improvements. It's easy to put it off until it's perfect conditions. Just block out 15 minutes to identify that next little improvement, as Keith mentioned, and just work with your teams to implement it. Focus on doing the implementation rather than just chatting about it or leaving it on a to-do list.
Yeah, don't think about it, just do it. Mark?
Yeah. Oh, well, yeah, all sorts of things. Just get on and do it, and just seek some advice would probably be pick up the phone to someone. Keith's very true about communicating. If you want a bit more information, talk to someone that's done it or implemented it, and that'll hopefully make the transition a lot easier. But what a broadcast. Can I just say, Matt, before we dial off, a big thank you again to Fram Farmers, our sponsors, for enabling this to happen. The next technical forum will be live from the South of England show in June on Saturday, the 6th of June at 2 p.m. And that's where we'll delve into smarter decisions for stronger margins. So building on today's conversation, which should be really, really good.
Well done. And for everyone on the podcast, we lost Ben about a minute 30 ago because his internet's been a bit dodgy all during this broadcast. So it's not that he doesn't love us, but I think his internet has fallen over. So everyone, thank you very much. Just to wrap up, because we always like to wrap up with something slightly jovial. We'll see how this goes. Could you each tell me your favourite colour of cow? Neil?
Black and white.
Oh, Keith?
I'm very disappointed, but every time my son walks through his shed, he points out the one red cow with glee, which is
excellent. Ben, favourite colour of cow?
I do quite like a jersey. I probably shouldn't say that, but I do.
Excellent. Mark, wrap up for us. Favourite colour of cow and favourite name of cow?
Obviously, the favourite colour of cows. I milk cows in Guernsey. My wife's a Guern. I have to say Guernseys all the day. But no, again, thank you to our panel. It's been fantastic. Thank you for your time. There's been some really insightful conversations at which we could have gone on for another hour. Thank you very much. And again, thank you to Fram Farmers, and we'll see you on the next one.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thank you all.